Welcome back to the JB Sports Podcast. Today is Tuesday, January 27th, and we're back for another pod. So, I'm usually not the person doing the intros here. If you've been listening for a while, you probably know that by now. But if you're not the first time listening, usually this is a two-person pod with both me and my brother and co-host Jace. Because of the recent weather that I think a lot of people in the country have dealt with, so it's no surprise to you, unless you're in the West Coast and I think in the Deep South. You probably know about it, probably experienced something because of it. So we have to experience it here from where we're at in Ohio. So because of that, Jace won't be here today. It'll just be me kind of sitting here talking to you guys, talking to a wall in the physical world with me just sitting here talking. So that's about it. So hopefully we'll be able to have him on. I think we're only doing one pod this week because there's no Super Bowl this week. So I think there might be only one both this week and next week. I'm not going to necessarily stick to that. If something happens that makes me really want to jump on and have to talk about something, I'll go ahead and jump on and kind of get into things. If something seems something warrants me having a pod about it. But plan as of right now is to do one pod this week and then one next week going into the Super Bowl. So that's the plan as of right now. Today we have, I have a couple of college football things I wanted to talk about today, a couple stories, and then we'll get into the NFL where I have a couple stories I want to talk about there, as well as reacting to these two games this past Sunday with the conference championship games that happened. So that's the plan for us today. I'm not sure how long it's going to be. Again, I always say I want to make it shorter, but then I make it just as long, if not longer. So I'm not going to promise anything. I just want to kind of jump in, talk about what we got to talk about, and we'll see where it ends by the time it's over. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. So college football things. I think I have like 3 or 4 stories I really wanted to jump into. Like nothing necessarily all that insane, but I want to start with Deion. So Deion Sanders, big name in the college football world as of this point, in the NFL world as well. But as of recently, it's been mostly college football with him being the coach at the University of Colorado. He had a very a fast start at Colorado with his first 2 years with, his son, Shedeur Sanders being there, as well as Travis Hunter. And then this past year, where there was his first year without both Shedeur and Travis Hunter on the team, he has a lot of new guys. I'll give him some credit. I really did think that he was going to either try to jump into the NFL and be an NFL head coach or just straight up not be the head coach anymore at Colorado after Shedeur left, and Travis as well, because he never really showed an interest in wanting to do the high school recruiting, as well as he always talked about the fact that he had coached his sons up literally from every level. From Little League through high school through college. So I thought the next step would be for him to go and do it in the NFL as well, follow Shedeur wherever he went, especially since he went to the Browns. It wasn't like it was going to be, again, it's the Browns, so it's kind of bad, but who knows about that. But on top of that, I also thought with the health issues he was obviously experiencing with last year at Colorado, I thought, this might be the good time. And honestly, with all the health things, I thought he'd probably get a free pass from everybody, at least for most people, when it comes to, you were there as long as you can get something from coaching your sons, and as soon as they're gone, you decide to leave too. So I thought he could have gotten a free pass from that by, with the health issues, but apparently he still wants to do it. He's still there, and as of recently, he's going to be going on a second year without any children of his or Travis Hunter being the coach there. So, but he has made some news with his recent fine system that he has announced for his guys in his college football in his program. So, I think he's been doing fines and stuff for what he's been doing there at Colorado, but apparently it's never been as much as what it is now. And on its face, I don't necessarily disagree with it, because you are dealing with high school players that are now not high school, now college players that are getting money, that have a lot more power in a lot of these situations. But if there's a chance for you to have, this is what they do in the NFL, right? This is kind of like the same deal, is that if you miss practice or don't show up, you're late, fines can definitely be assessed to guys in the NFL. So the idea that now these players in college football are getting paid, especially the more high tier guys, I can understand if you're a guy like Deion Sanders that wants to establish a culture and to have some what's the word I'm looking for? Not reliability. What's the word I'm looking for? Some oh no, you got to take responsibility? Accountability. That's the word I'm looking for. If you want to have some accountability in your locker room, this is a way to do so. Do I think that you do I think it maybe is like one of those like on the line things, like you are still dealing with college kids, like they're still going to have those issues even if they are kids getting paid now, which on one hand I think can potentially be an argument I'm willing to listen to, but on the other hand, these kids are also getting paid a decent amount of money to go where they're going. And if they want to be big boys and they want to get paid on one end, I think they have to be willing to potentially, depending on where they're going, accept maybe fines and stuff coming from the other end, because that's something that, teams can do to try to establish a locker room and establish accountability throughout everything, because it's very black and white. If you're there or you're not there on time, not on time, it's very black and white. And I don't necessarily find this like to be appalling that this is something that Deion Sanders is doing. So let's get to the numbers here as to how much they'll be fining. So for being late to practice, the players will have a $500 fine. Not showing up at all to practice is a $2,500 fine. Other fines as well will be $2,000 for being a no-show at a meeting or a film session, or $400 for being late, as well as $1,500 for not showing up to a strength and conditioning workout, or $1,000 for being late for treatment, or $1,500 for being a no-show to treatment, and then also up to $2,500 for a violation of team rules, and up to $5,000 for public or social media misconduct. Dang, that's potentially a lot of money. Because here's what I'll say, right? As much as I talk about how these players are getting paid and all of that, like, it's not every player on your roster that's getting paid thousands upon thousands of dollars. And again, I guess part of it now is with the agreements, the NIL agreements, when it comes to like the payments from the school. Maybe you can guarantee that some of these players are getting paid enough on top of like getting their scholarships that they can pay fines like that. But I think also, like, if that's going to be something you're going to, especially if you're going to have that as part of your locker room, I think some of the players that are getting paid those lower amounts, they have a bigger sense of responsibility to do the little things, which is probably why they would be showing up anyway. And it's more for the people that are the kids that are getting paid a lot more money that maybe get a little bit too full of themselves and then, start doing not focusing on the little things, like some of the players that aren't getting the big amounts of money that you're going to be getting to go to these schools. Like I already said, I don't think I necessarily disagree with it. Would I like for there to be a world where you just bring in the right kids to your locker room to where that's not an issue? And if it does become an issue, you can potentially do it the old-fashioned way and just run the team to death. Like, if they're not going to show up and not going to do the right things, everybody's going to pay for it when it comes to having to do more physically taxing stuff when it comes to running and sprints and working out and all of that. But I think that if you feel like you need to do it, I don't think I necessarily disagree with the idea of it, because again, money is now a part of it from top to bottom when it comes to players and then coaches and everybody around. And I can't necessarily fault Deion for potentially bringing in money as a potential way to try to create some accountability in a locker room. I can't, because again, it happens in the NFL. And they do it for even bigger amounts of money when it comes to not showing up to practices and stuff like that. Heck, stuff like that, you can avoid contracts potentially. So I'm not going to say, if they're doing it for the big grown adults in the NFL making a lot more money, I think there is a little bit of a good thought behind doing it for the younger people getting a lot of money at very young ages to then transfer to these schools. And if they start getting full of themselves and not doing little things right, money can be coming out of your pockets because we're putting money into them once you come here. So I just thought the amounts of money was like a little bit surprising when I was looking at it, but when you're looking at how much these players are getting paid, it's not necessarily the craziest thing in the world. And I just think on its face, there's a lot of things I've disagreed with Deion with when it comes to how he's coached his team before and how maybe he takes a little bit of I'm not gonna go too far into the differences between what I would like Deion to do rather than what he is doing. So I'm not gonna go down that road. But I don't always disagree. I don't always agree with Deion. But I think in this scenario, I can understand where he's coming from and maybe potentially agree. Again, I hope that's not needed at a place like Ohio State, where I'm a fan of and all that. But if it is, then I'm not gonna be mad. I'm not gonna be mad at all about it. So. That's it for that story. Again, it wasn't too big of a deal, but I wanted to jump into that, as well as the Darien Mensah and Duke thing. I just wanted to talk about that because I think I mentioned this on the pod 2 weeks ago when it comes to the story about Darien Mensah, the quarterback for Duke, and entering the transfer portal, and that because he wanted to go to Miami because Miami was trying to give him a fuck ton of money. I think upwards of $10 million, depending, because of all the things that he wanted when it comes to the buyouts and paying him and getting his sister into school and buying him a house and all of that. So, with all of that, I mentioned that story a couple weeks ago, and it kind of has come to a conclusion as of recently, because I think last time I talked about it, Duke was going to sue him and that they were going to try to make sure that they were trying to keep him because they wanted Darien Mensah to honor the contract that he had signed with them. He hadn't recently signed a contract. I think they were still working off the same contract that he had signed last year when they gave him 2 years of guaranteed money to go to Duke. And Duke, with how they were looking at it, was saying, "Hey, we want you to sit there. We want you to honor the contract we had you sign." And that's pretty much it with the scenario, right? And especially when he tries to get into the portal the very last day because Miami comes calling because they had pretty much struck out on everybody else that they had tried to get in the portal while going on their run of getting to the national championship game. So I think this news came out today that Darien Mensah and Duke have pretty much settled they've pretty much came together and settled an agreement for a buyout in certain, and honestly, no other certain terms. It's a buyout. I think they've come to an agreement on what Duke would be willing to let him go and just let him out of his NIL contract to let him then go to Miami if that's where he so pleases to go, which is where he's going to go because Miami's going to pay him that much money. And on one hand, this is kind of what I asked for earlier on when I was talking about this a few weeks ago on the pod, is if we just institute a buyout clause on pretty much every single NIL contract that these guys sign, I think it can lead to I'm not going to say it's going to fix all the issues, but I do think it'll lead to a lot of the fringe issues overall to not be as big of a deal, right? Or at least to be as rampant, right? Because the way I look at it is that if you have these guys and these schools want to get these guys in on a contract, and especially if they're going to be the higher tiered NIL guys that are going to get a lot more money, the Darien Mensahs, the Jeremiah Smiths, and all of that, and these guys are going to be commanding the amount of money they're going to command, I think that there's going to be a chance for schools to be able to work in buyout clauses in these contracts to where, hey, we'll give you this money that you're looking for, and we'll also give you an opportunity to go into the portal if you see another opportunity that fits you. But if that's going to be the case, then that school, whoever you're going to be going to, or yourself, is going to have to pay a hefty fine, just like for coaches, right? There's going to be a hefty buyout clause to make sure that if you really want to go, that there's going to be some damages to be paid. And again, will it change for the top tier? Probably not. But I think it'll make it not nearly as rampant for the lower tier guys, because the schools aren't going to want to pay these buyouts, and the kids are for sure aren't going to want to pay these buyouts to have to go pick up from school to school just for a little bit of a payday if they're going to have to pay in the front end of it. So I think on one hand, I think this is a big deal when it comes to contracts in general for the NIL for the schools and for the kids when they sign them, to where try to make them more ironclad, to have buyout clauses to where stuff like this is going to happen. At least the school that the kid is leaving will have a chance to kind of recoup some of that money back, to where they'll be able to use that towards other kids that they're going to have to use NIL with. And I think that's on one hand. And on the other hand, I'm like, I do feel a little bit sad, because could Duke have really fought this and really like led to, again, it would have gotten messy between both Duke and Darien Mensah and everybody in general, but I think there was a more like overarching fight that was to be had there, because this was a ACC on ACC crime. This was Miami doing it to another school in their own conference. And I do think that there was a tampering aspect of it that maybe not take, because tampering isn't necessarily all that bad. And I think there is a relatively, there's a level of tampering that is accepted in college football. But I just think that there was a fight that could have been had here, that if Duke had taken on this fight against Miami and against the ACC and against Darien Mensah and tried to make I hate to say it, but kind of make an example out of him in this scenario, and like say, hey, if you're going to sign a contract, you have to stick by it, and we're going to make sure we fight this to the death. But in the end, I wish they would have, because I think this could have led to some real change in contracts going forward when it comes to, I think the schools, I think as much as I love players getting paid and like getting paid what they're worth, because the players are the ones putting their lives on the line for the money that these schools are getting and that the fans are getting, and that these TV contracts are paying out for these schools. Like, everybody's getting paid off of what these kids are doing out there. So I love the idea of these players getting paid and getting a piece of what they definitely deserve, because it's their bodies, the ones that are be putting on the line to entertain not only the fans but the college football world, and so they do deserve that money. But I think it's gone so far the other way when it comes to the movement, the portal, the NIL money, the pay to play. I think all of it has gone so rampant that I do think there has to be a little bit of fight from these schools and from these athletic programs and from these conferences to be like, hey, we got to take back a little bit of control here. And again, I get it. They're not going to ever take, at least I don't believe so. They're never going to take the biggest straw of trying to make these players employees in order to really put some real rules in place. I think all they're going to be waiting for is hoping for the government to give them the out of giving them the antitrust exemption, just like the NFL got, in order to make the rules that they had, because it's kind of like anti-competitiveness, kind of like monopoly in a sense. So I hate that like that's going to be the only way for real change to happen. But I do think in this fight there could have been a chance for a little bit of change to try to help, if this is what it's going to be for a decent amount of time when it comes to how long this is like the rampant part of this NIL stuff and the portal is going to be an issue. I thought this could have been something to help the whole process out a little bit, but Duke decided that they did not want to, make this as ugly as it was going to be. They didn't want to go and like make this a legal battle that people are going to have to pay a lot of money for lawyers and all of that. So Duke decided, hey, as much as we would love to fight this, as much as we would love for Darien Mensah to come back, we can just come to an agreement on a buyout clause, and then he can go on his way. We can kind of, wipe our hands of this and go upon our merry way and let Duke go to Miami if he so chooses. But it's just, I just really would have loved to see this kind of go through and see what kind of fight this really could have caused and what changes could have made. But again, I get at the end of the day, you don't necessarily want to make this as dirty, as messy as it was going to be, because it was already turning out to be very messy when it comes to all the stuff that was coming out news-wise. But I don't know. I just feel like it could have been a real... I'm not going to say like all of this whole thing was going to happen and it was going to change the way the college sports is going to be, change the way of the NIL and portal and all that, like totally change it, right? I didn't think it was going to be that drastic. But I did think it opened the door to a certain extent. But I do think that the fact that there was a buyout that was agreed to, the player gets to go on his merry way. And I do think you have a lot of college programs that look at this scenario and be like, hey, we probably need to work in a big buyout, because taking this fight and doing it the long way probably isn't going to work all that well. So just make sure if we're going to have guys leaving our program, there is going to be some restitution paid either by the player or by the program that's going to be poaching them to make sure at least you get that money on the back end for your NIL so you can get other players to then replace them. If that all makes sense at all. But again, if you knew the situation, I think that makes total sense. If not, then go back to previous pods or go look up the Darien Mensah story and you'll get a good idea of what had been going on and how potentially game-breaking that could have been if it could have been fought in the long term. Let's see here. Other story I wanted to talk about here was Ohio State. So I have two things that are Ohio State. Again, I want to talk about them because, I'm an Ohio State fan. If you don't know, a big Buckeye fan. That's the one that hits me my feels the most is watching Ohio State play and all that, even more than my pro teams and all of that. So I have two Ohio State stories I wanted to get into before we got into everything else in the for the NFL and stuff like that. So I will talk about the OC hire first. So Ohio State is going to be hiring ex-Steelers offensive coordinator, ex-Steelers OC and former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, Mr. Arthur Smith. Let me think. On its face, I think I was more positive about them hiring him than a lot of people were when it comes to social media and all of that. I think there are a lot of people that are complaining about how Arthur Smith didn't do a great job in Pittsburgh for the last 2 years. And when he was with the Falcons, like they were real talented dudes, Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts that he didn't get the ball to. So there are a lot of people that were questioning whether this was going to be a good hire by Ryan Day to bring in Arthur Smith to be the next OC for Ohio State. And I'll look at this from two scenarios, right? From two outlooks. From the Ohio State side of this is where I see it. When I looked at how this past season went for Ohio State and for Ryan Day, and with Brian Hartline being the OC here for the past year, the actual OC, at least trying to call plays, I didn't see that as the best working scenario. It didn't really work out as good as I thought it would. Obviously, I think there was little news nuggets here or there that pretty much said that Ryan Day had to pretty much take over play calling for a good portion throughout the year because Brian Hartline, as good as he is at getting wide receivers in and coaching them up, he wasn't, especially as a newer guy, doing it because he's only been doing it for the past year or so. There was no way Brian Hartline in that spot was going to be able to call plays in a way that'll be good enough for a place like Ohio State. And Ryan Day knew that when he promoted him, because again, he had to promote him because there was no way you're going to keep Brian Hartline outside of that, especially this past year, to keep bringing in wide receivers and all of that. So Ryan Day had no choice coming off the championship, and with Chip leaving and taking the $18 million that the Raiders decided to pay him over 3 years. Again, he didn't even last one, which is hilarious, and now he's going to be at Northwestern next season being their OC. Ryan Day had no choice but to promote Brian Hartline and hope that Brian Hartline would be able to take over the mantle of, I never thought that Ryan really thought that Brian Hartline was going to take over play calling totally, especially not in his first year of doing so full time. But I did think that it went pretty not terribly, but did not go even as well as they could have hoped, because Ryan Day ended up having to take over controls for multiple times throughout the year, especially in big games. And you could just tell Ryan Day had to take it over. And I think the year before, when Ryan Day was able to be a little more hands-off with the offense and kind of be more of the CEO role, with Chip Kelly as the head coach, as the OC, and then with, why am I forgetting the DC's name? Jim Knowles being the DC, I think Ryan Day did have to kind of come in and kind of change some things up throughout the year after the Oregon game defensively. And then once the playoff got started, I think Ryan Day was able to get more hands-on with the offense and be able to help out the passing game in the postseason, which led to Ohio State going on the crazy run that they did not last season, but the season before in 2024, and winning the national championship and everything. So I do think with that 2024 run, I think it was very obvious that Ryan Day as a CEO was going to be the best way for Ryan Day to be the best head coach he can be long term, as well as getting the best performance out of Ohio State year in, year out, with Ryan Day being the head coach, is by not having him have to be so hands-on with the offense. And I think throughout this past season, with Brian Hartline being the OC, I think Ryan Day had to get more and more involved with the offense throughout the year as bigger games were coming up and everything. And I think that does make him a little bit worse of a head coach overall, because I think Ryan Day has a tendency to get too involved in the play sheet. And I think he kind of can't see the forest through the trees. And I think that because of that, I came into this offseason saying that one of the main things that Ryan Day needs to do, on top of, keeping guys and changing up how they were going to do some things philosophy-wise, when it comes to playing a little bit faster and not necessarily playing as slow throughout the year, which, again, Ryan Day and the Ohio State coaching staff has maintained that they didn't think that they played too slow throughout the year. They pretty much have said that they thought that it was more about execution, all of that, and big moments in those games against, Indiana and Miami, where it was more about execution than actually, philosophy-wise playing faster like some fans would like them to. I think the main thing was, I think Ryan Day needs to get a real offensive coordinator in there so he can go back to being the CEO again, and then as he can get into the playoff and stuff like that, he can get more involved, and then I think he has a lot more time to do so. He had to get especially had to get an outside hire, because just hiring from within with all the young guys that Ohio State has on the roster when it comes to on the coaching staff offensively, it's a bunch of young guys and Ryan Day. Ryan Day being, I think it is mid-40s, like late 40s, I believe, in his age. I thought, and then a bunch of all the other guys in the offensive play calling side are a bunch of young dudes, and they can't really have an opinion. They don't really have the cachet to look at Ryan Day and say, hey, this is how it needs to go, especially when it comes to calling the offense. So if there was a chance that he was going to hire from within, I thought that was going to be a terrible idea, because at the end of the day, the young guys that he had hired, that he gave all those guys the opportunities that they have, none of them were going to be able to look at Ryan Day and say, hey, you're wrong. This is how we should do things here. And I think that the fact that he was able to bring an outside guy, an NFL guy that has not only experience calling plays for years, as well as doing it at the highest level in the NFL, I do think Arthur Smith can come in and have some ideas and be able to actually call the offense, where Ryan Day doesn't have to be nearly as focused on the play sheet and on offensive meetings throughout the week. And throughout games, he can kind of read the game as it goes throughout the game, rather than having to be heads on in the play sheet trying to hand feed a young OC. So I just think all in all, it was a great pick, for at least a great job by Ohio State to go outside the Woody, go get a guy from the NFL that I didn't really think was going to be an option. Nope, he never really came up as a potential guy until it pretty much happened, especially with Arthur Smith kind of still taking OC interviews when it comes to the Eagles and the Titans. So he was still taking interviews in the NFL to take OC jobs when he had gotten fired by Pittsburgh, when Mike Tomlin stepped down, and then we hired McCarthy and all of that. So that was the first time he had really gotten fired as an OC. So he was still going to be in the NFL if he hadn't taken this job to come to Ohio State. So I just think that overall, and there was no way we were going to get the Brian Dabolls of the world, because they were still options to be OCs in the NFL and all of that. So I just think when it comes to Ohio State, what they wanted to do, what Ryan Day wanted to do, was to bring in a more veteran OC that can actually call the plays and that can bring in his own ideas and kind of marry them with what Ryan Day would like to do. And I think that Arthur Smith, with him being the guy, when it comes to how I think the offense is going to go, I do think it could be a very good marriage. Because what happened when Chip Kelly kind of came in to be the OC, again, I get it, there was what's the word I'm looking for? There was a prior relationship there with Ryan Day and Chip, being like, he had known Chip for such a long time before he brought Chip in to be the OC at Ohio State. So there's more of a pre-existing relationship rather than what's going on right now with Arthur Smith, where there's no pre-existing relationship at all. This is, hey, I'm bringing you in to be the OC. I'm going to pay you $3 million, and you can come in and not even have to recruit because you're not even going to be one of the 10 recruiting guys that we're going to have to send out like everybody, like all the young guys, to go out and recruit players on a constant basis. So I do think that when it comes to all that, I think Ohio State really did bring in a good guy that might be able to get the best out of the Ohio State's offense for at least for next year and maybe years to come if Arthur Smith's going to be here a little bit longer than that. So when it comes schematic wise, I think that Arthur Smith was more of a running game guy with his best years being when he was with Tennessee. He had Derrick Henry, which is like one of the best running backs that have ever lived in the NFL. So I'm not going to sit here and say that he was the total reason that Derrick Henry was as successful as he was when when they were both in Tennessee. But I will say that he did get Ryan Tannehill, who was a guy that was not looked at as an NFL quarterback, to be good. Ryan Tannehill was good enough to get Tennessee. I think they got all the way to the AFC Championship game, I believe, or the divisional round. I don't really know off the top of my head, but he did a really good job at Tennessee by making Ryan Tannehill a very good quarterback and using Derrick Henry and using play action and having very good run game on top of being able to get some bigger plays down the field with a little bit lesser of a quarterback. So I do think in general, like when you look at what he could be at his best with Tennessee and what he can maybe bring that to Ohio State a little bit when it comes to the run game and having his expertise in that, and then marrying that with Ryan Day's passing game, I do think that they can be a very good marriage, just like what Chip did when he came to Ohio State. When it came to Chip being a more run game guy, I think he has a little bit more tempo in his arsenal than what Arthur Smith does, but I do think that that's not going to be a big deal. I think Arthur Smith is a grown-up that knows what he's doing offensively, so I think adding tempo to the offense is not going to be a big deal. But I just think when you put that all together, I do think that they can kind of marry those two things together with Ryan Day's passing offense, with Arthur Smith's his run scheme, and I do think they can bring it together and kind of like do some really good things with the offense. And again, there's some people that's going to like talk about the fact that when he was at Atlanta and he had all those talented players and didn't get them the ball enough. The fact that there was a guy like Bijan on his roster and he found ways not to use him. Again, that's one thing, but I will also contend that, in that scenario, he was the head coach and there was nobody above him to sit there and look at him and say, hey, we have to, especially on game day, like, hey, we have to get these guys the football. And he does have that now. I think Ryan Day will be able to look at him or talk to him on game day and say, hey, it's time to go get number 4 the ball. And so there will be a guy ahead of him to be able to tell him, hey, you can't be doing some of the things he was doing in Atlanta. And then I'm not gonna blame Arthur Smith as a Steeler fan myself who watched a lot of games intently and really understood what he's been doing at Pittsburgh the last 2 years. I'm not gonna blame Arthur Smith for what the offense for Pittsburgh has looked like over the last couple of years, because guess what? He was dealing with offenses that had very terrible skill position guys for the most part throughout his past 2 years here. His first year, he had George Pickens, and there was pretty much nobody else offensively to rely upon to kind of help out when it came to really making explosive plays. And then this year, all he had was DK Metcalf, and what other pass catchers? We had a couple tight ends, Pat Freiermuth, and we brought in Jonnu Smith. And then we had Washington, the huge tight end that we had. Not Dwayne Washington. Darnell Washington. So we had like all those tight ends in why am I forgetting his name now? In DK Metcalf. And then outside that, we really had no other weapons in our offense the past 2 years. And not to mention this year, he was dealing with a 40-something-year-old Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. So really very limited on what they can do when it comes to moving the quarterback around and like getting him out to the pocket and like avoiding pressures. Like he wasn't going to get any of that. And then last year, quarterback wise, he was dealing with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And I do think that he made Justin Fields look pretty good early on last year before Mike Tomlin ultimately decided to go with Russell Wilson and thought that the passing offense would be better with him rather than Justin Fields. But I do think that Arthur Smith made Justin Fields actually a viable quarterback in the NFL those 7 weeks when Justin Fields was the starting quarterback. But again, for whatever reason, it didn't work out, and Mike Tomlin decided to go differently. So overall, I'm just not going to blame Arthur Smith and think that he is going to do terrible with the offense at Ohio State now that he's going to be the OC, because guess what? One thing he's never going to have to deal with is a lack of talent, especially this year with number 4 at wide receiver. All the other guys we do have in the wide receiver room still, even after all those guys had left, after Brian Hartline decided to go be the head coach at USF. So we still have plenty of pass catchers. We have plenty of running backs. Our offensive line is going to be pretty good. And there's never going to be a lack of talent for what he's going to be dealing with at Ohio State. That's one. 2, when it comes to him deciding not to give certain people the ball and like having like weird spots like that where he's not using all the weapons at his disposal, I think Ryan Day will be obviously his boss to tell him, hey, it's time to use the weapons that we have. So I'm not worried about that at all either. So I think both of those things that people were talking about, I just don't see as big issues when he's coming to Ohio State. And not to mention he was doing it at the highest level in the NFL. And I do think there is going to be a little bit of him coming back to the college game. And let's be honest, defenses and offenses aren't as... I think offenses are probably closer to the NFL than defenses are. And so I do think that him coming back and playing against college defenses will make things a lot easier for him, to where I do think he's going to be... I think he's overqualified for the job, to be totally honest with you. So I think all in all, I think it'll be a great hire for Ohio State to have Arthur Smith to come in here and be the OC, call plays for Ryan Day, and get that off his plate so Ryan Day can go back to being the OC that I think he was doing a very good job at when they went and won the national championship 2 seasons ago. So I think it's going to be a good hire overall. I think it's going to help out everybody. I think it's going to help out Ryan Day, be the best coach he can be. So that's all I have on Arthur Smith being the next OC at Ohio State. Let me get to the OSU schedule here. And I don't think I want to talk too long about this, because let's be honest, not everybody that listens to our podcast is an Ohio State fan. But for those that do come in and expect some a little bit of Ohio State stuff when it does come out, the schedule was released today for the 2026 season. So I just wanted to make sure to kind of talk about this real quick, because I do think it's kind of a big deal with what came out. So let me just get to this, just say the schedule from top to bottom, and then we'll get to the and then I'll get to what my thoughts are on it. So Week 1 versus Ball State, they're coming to the shoe, obviously. Obviously, one of those easy games, kind of a tune-up game. Week 2 at Texas, it's a big one. We're going to have to go to Texas, go to Austin to face Arch Manning, and that I think going to be very explosive offense. I do think it's going to be a very tough test in Week 2, especially on the road, especially with the defense that Ohio State's going to have. It's going to be a lot younger of a defense coming in, so I do think that's going to be a very tough test early on in the year, but I am glad that's not going to be Week 1 like, the game with Texas Week 1 was this past season. Week 3 is going to be Kent State. They're going to be coming to the shoe. Week 4, it's going to be Illinois coming to the shoe to play us. I think it's going to be a pretty decent game. That'll be week 5 is going to be at Iowa. That's in Iowa City. So I do think that's going to be, again, Iowa's going to be Iowa. They're going to have a really good defense. The offense is going to be struggling. I think Ohio State will have not much of an issue there as long as they can handle the defense. Week 6, we have Maryland coming to town, coming to Columbus and playing Ohio State. That's going to be a pretty, not going to say a good game because Maryland's not all that good. But I think Maryland usually has a pretty good offense for Ohio State to have to handle. And then week 6, you have at Indiana. So this is going to be the battle of the prior 2 national champions going up against each other. So Ohio State's going to have to go to Indiana October 17th to go play them. That'll probably be probably a big noon game. So that's going to be a huge game to have to play. And then you have a bye week, and then you have at USC. That's a big road matchup. I don't think, again, USC will probably be better than what they were this past season, especially having to go and face them at in California will definitely be a big deal. I think this 3-week stretch is what will probably decide Ohio State's season, if they're going to be, playoff bound or not. So that at USC October 31st after a bye between Indiana and USC, and then November 7th, a week later, you have Oregon coming to Columbus. That's going to be another big game that Ohio State. That's a 3-week stretch right there. I think that 3-week stretch will decide if Ohio State's going to be a playoff team or not, I think, to be totally honest with you. And I think it's going to be a big one. It's going to be a big test, but you are going to have that bye in the middle of Indiana and USC. So I do think it's going to help, not to mention not all those games will be on the road with Oregon coming to Columbus. So I think not the worst it could possibly be. I do hate that it's kind of 3 out of 4 weeks you're going to have to go face all of those tough tests. But I do think Ohio State could manage it. If you win 2 out of 3 of those games, I think Ohio State will be in a good spot. And then November 14th, you have, that's at week 7, week 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's week 10, Northwestern. You have Northwestern coming to Columbus and playing them. I'm not going to say the weeks because I think it's 13 weeks in a season, so there's 2 byes in there that I probably missed. So it's going to be a week. So game 10 is going to be at Northwestern coming to Ohio State. I think there'll be a tough test. I think they were a pretty decent team this year, but I think that Ohio State should have that game in the bag just fine. And then you have November 21st at Nebraska. Going to be a big one. Their fans always show up in their place. They're very raucous. It's a crazy environment to have to go play in. And then if you've watched it on TV, those fans are absolutely insane. And they will show out. They are going to be breaking in a new quarterback this season because Dylan Raiola had left to go be the backup at Oregon. So I do think I'm not looking at Nebraska as being as big of a problem this year as they would have been in prior years if you had to go to Nebraska to face them. But again, that is a crazy environment to have to go face, especially with it being a week before Ohio State's going to host Michigan in the last week of the year. Again, just like every year, Ohio State will host Michigan. Not every year Ohio State hosting them, but, they have to play Michigan at the final week every year being the game. So Ohio State's going to be hosting Michigan. So the fact that they have to go to Nebraska the week before that, I think is going to be a big deal. Might be a little bit of a trap game there. But I think Ohio State should be able to handle it, especially with, Michigan coming to Ohio State. I think we'll take a little bit off Ohio State's plate in that so they don't have to go on the road to Ann Arbor. But that's the schedule. And then this is my main thought on the schedule and how it kind of worked out. It's crazy that the schedule took this long to come out. I think this was a Tony Petitti thing where he decided, hey, we're going to go ahead and take a little longer on the schedules and we're going to come out with them whenever they do. So usually you have the schedules well before this, and it's kind of crazy that we had to wait as long as we did to know what the schedule is going to be for this upcoming season, especially with, I think, like spring practice starts in like 5 weeks. So I do think it's going to be a little late, but again, the NFL does this every year where they have a big schedule announcement and everybody cares and it becomes a big deal. I think they have a whole schedule announcement day where they have like leaking the couple days before of some of the games, and they have a whole big extravaganza of announcing the schedules coming out and all. So if the NFL can do it, I think you can bring a little bit of that to the college game. But again, I hate that it came out as late as it did. But it is what it is. I think the only thing it changes is what Ohio State's going to have to do to kind of like plan this stuff out. They don't have as much time to plan, and when it comes to having to get hotels and planes for all of these people that are going to have to be going on these trips is going to be probably a little bit big deal. But overall, I think having this is like a we're going to come out with the schedule for everybody all at once. I think does add a little bit of excitement to the thing. You got to get to have a little bit of the take a bite at the news cycle for sports. I do think it kind of did. Again, I'm talking about it right now on the podcast here, so. That I'm a little bit iffy about with it taking as long as it did, but I don't hate the fact they're doing a little bit of like an announcement of like trying to make it take a little bit out of, like I said before, take a little bit of the news cycle out of it for sports fans in general who are either knee deep in NFL stuff or they're going on to NBA. So I don't hate for what they're doing. Now to the actual schedule and what I think about it. I think this might be the most difficult schedule Ohio State has had in a little while. The fact that you're going to be looking at a game at Texas, You're going to be facing Illinois, Iowa, at Indiana, at USC, Oregon, and Michigan. Like, I just counted 7 games that I think all of those teams could be ranked when Ohio State faces them. So I do think this is going to be a lot more difficult of a schedule than Ohio State's had in a while. And again, this was really kind of like a little bit of the talk about the schedule for Ohio State last season, coming into last season, coming into it, because everybody thought Ohio State's defense would be super young and they have a little bit younger offense, breaking in a new quarterback and everything. So I don't think it's as bad because I think the offense will be fine. I think they'll be I think they're only replacing one starter on the offense for the most part. Sorry, 2 starters if you include Carnell Tate leaving. Carnell Tate and then the right guard. So we're only replacing 2 guys on the offense. So I think the offense will be fine throughout this stretch for the season. But I think defensively, the fact you're replacing so many guys, especially in the middle, you're replacing guys like Caleb Downs and Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles and not Kenyatta. Oh no, why am I forgetting his name? I'm forgetting the defensive tackle's name. I hate that I'm forgetting his name right now. Why am I forgetting his name? Going to NFL. Caden McDonald. Sorry, I had a total brain fart there. I totally forgot his name there for a second. So you're replacing a lot of guys in the middle of the defense that you're going to have to replace with new guys. So I think that's going to be probably make it a little bit harder on the schedule throughout the year. But I think in general, this is going to be a very tough schedule. And again, I think Ohio State will probably be favored in most of these games. So I don't think that's necessarily changing. I think Ohio State would still be looked at as like one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the Big Ten. I know I'm only not putting them at number 1 because, Indiana did just win the national championship. So I do have to give them and Kurt Cignetti that respect. But I do think Ohio State's going to be favored in most of the games that they're going to be playing this year. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. But I do think it's a lot of tough games. And I think that, especially when in a year that we don't have to play Penn State, you'd think that the schedule would get easier. But it only got harder by having those teams from the West Coast that we now have to face instead. So I think in general that if this is what the schedules are going to look like from now on, and you're going to potentially, I think the Big Ten's been talking about adding a 10th game to the schedule as a 10 Big Ten games rather than 9 Big Ten games. I think it's going to be very hard for the games against Texas's and Alabama's and Georgia's to keep happening if it kind of goes that way, because you're going to be facing so many good teams in the Big Ten. I do think, again, on one hand, I'm a little bit sad about that because I do like having these, these cross conference foes in playing some of these bigger games against the Alabamas and the Texases and Georgias. Like, I like having those games in the regular season, especially early on. Those are really games get you juiced up for the most part, right? But I think from the Big Ten's end, if you really think in the Big Ten that you're going to have teams overall are going to be a lot better throughout the Big Ten, and then you're going to have some of these, if the Big Ten is going to keep doing this of winning back-to-back-to-back national titles, and all these teams from the Big Ten are really doing it and coming up and having a lot better teams overall, is that I think the Big Ten has to start treating themselves a little bit like the SEC treats themselves. Hey, we're the big fish in the pond, and we have a lot of teams that we have to play, so we have to play some of these lesser teams in order to, last throughout a whole schedule, like what the SEC's been doing for years. And if the SEC can get away with it, and they're just now going to 9 SEC games and all of that, then I think the Big Ten should be able to take advantage of that a little bit too. If you're going to be having schedules like this for some of your best teams in your conference, I think games with Texas and Georgia's and Bama's from here on out probably will go away. And it's sad on one hand to say, but I think on the other hand, I think you have to be realistic. And if you're going to be having all these tough games on your schedule and all these Big Ten, if you want all these Big Ten teams to start getting better and to be tougher outs for some of your best teams in your conference, then I think a lot of these games against those higher tiered opponents for teams like Ohio State, I think you should take off the schedule because it doesn't make sense. why give yourself a chance for another loss if losing games is going to be all that matters? Like, well, sorry, not losing games, but like when you lose games and all of that, rather than they're not going to necessarily give you, it's not going to hurt you if you go beat up on a team that doesn't deserve to be on the same field as you. So, I don't know. It's a little bit of a shame because those games are probably going away. And heck, the juice I got from Ohio State playing Texas week 1 this past season, and the juice that I'll have going into week 2 of next season when Ohio State goes to Texas to face them in Austin, I hate to maybe see that go, but again, on its face, I understand why those games might be in danger of being gone because, the schedule's in the Big Ten and your own conference schedule is going to be a lot harder. So scheduling those games against other top-tier opponents, especially when you're probably have to face them in the playoff anyway, probably will go away. So, it's just one of those, like, you give something, you take some, you give and you take away. So it is what it is. But I think it is a little bit of an end of an era, to be totally honest with you. So that's about it on that. That's what I have on the schedule. I think that the schedule is going to be very tough, and I think Ohio State's going to have some real tough games to have to go through. But I think that if Ohio State can handle it and maybe get 2 out of the 3 of that hard stretch, that's 3 out of the 4 weeks when at Indiana, at USC, and Oregon, if you can get 2 out of 3 of those, I do think Ohio State will be in a good spot to make the playoff and to, be able to go on a run once again. But I think it's going to be a tough one, man. It's going to be a lot of crazy games to watch this season, so I'm very excited to see those. All right, that's it. So that's all the college football stories that I wanted to talk about. Anything else I wanted to get into? No, I don't think so. By the way, fun fact, Indiana, talk about Ohio State already, but Indiana does have back-to-back where they have to face OSU and the team up north, back-to-back weeks. So I do think that kind of sucks that Indiana has to get those 2 teams back-to-back. And again, here's the thing. Indiana this season was awesome. They pretty much taken out everybody that they had faced this year. But going into next year, because Indiana is pretty much bringing out a brand new team because all of their players are so old and they ran out of eligibility and they're going to be bringing in new guys in the portal. And because of all that, it's going to be a brand new team next year for Indiana. So it's not going to be a guarantee that they'll have the depth and have the guys that'll be ready to go through some of these higher tiered opponents, especially back-to-back weeks. It could definitely be a big deal for a team like Indiana that doesn't necessarily have the depth that even some of the bigger teams in their own conference have over them as of right now. And again, the depth has definitely gone away. Like teams like Ohio State and Georgia's and all of that don't have 5 stars on top of 5 stars on top of 5 stars or even high 4 stars. But I do think teams like those have a lot more, what's what I'm looking for, depth, just regular depth overall, even if it's not close to what it was 5 to 10 years ago. So that the fact they have 2 of those games back-to-back weeks for them is definitely going to be a huge deal. Again, they could just be a juggernaut yet again next year and that not be an issue. But until I see that, I think it'll be definitely a little bit of a but a challenging back-to-back weeks for them throughout their schedule that they're going to have going into next year where they're going to have to, defend their national title, which is, again, crazy the fact that I have to talk about Indiana defending a national title in football. Insane that is the case. But, Kurt Cignetti, he's earned it all. Kurt Cignetti and the Indiana program have earned all the credit they're getting right now for it. So, all right, getting off the college football, let's go college football topics. Let's go ahead to the NFL stuff. I have a couple of NFL stories to talk about, and then I'll get into the recap of the 2 the conference championship games that happened on Sunday. So let's go ahead and get to the story. So first story I want to talk about is Belichick not being named a first-ballot Hall of Famer. So there was a vote for, the Hall of Fame, just like every year in the NFL. And this was the first year that Bill Belichick was able to be considered because he had been out of the NFL game long enough for him to be in it. And according to the voting earlier this month, Belichick fell short of the 40 out of 50 votes needed for induction to the Pro Football Hall of Fame during this first year eligibility. So And apparently, based off of the news of that there was a guy, Bill Polian, who was a pretty famous GM for the Colts throughout his stint in the NFL, was one of the voters for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he was kind of leading the charge of when it comes to allegedly what was kind of being the case was that Bill Polian was leading the charge for some of those voters to be like, hey, we're going to make Bill Belichick wait for a year, even though he probably deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer as a head coach in the NFL because, he's one of the most winningest head coaches of all time in NFL history. On top of the dominance that he had with the Patriots, he deserves to be probably be a first ballot guy getting into the Hall of Fame. But the story was that he was leading a charge to be like, hey, let's make him wait it for a year because of the Deflategate stuff that happened, the Deflategate and the Spygate scandals that happened while he was at New England, right? And here's my thing, right? And again, I get the idea that if you are spurned and you feel like that he kind of got over on you at some point while he was coaching in the NFL, I understand you having negative feelings about that. But I think once you are given the task of voting in guys when it comes to having the task of deciding whether these guys deserve to be in these, prestigious positions of being in the Hall of Fame and all of that, I think you have to wipe a little bit of that away. And I think you have to take away the emotion of it. And I think you have to give in to the idea that it is your job just to be on its face, to look at these guys and their careers and what they have done and decide, are they worthy of being in the Hall of Fame or not? Again, he's going to get in the Hall of Fame anyway. There's no, it is not if, it is when. And the fact they're making him wait is definitely a big deal and that they shouldn't be. But I do think that he's going to get in sooner rather than later, and I think it's going to be next year because they just want to pull off the stunt of making him wait for a year when he shouldn't have to. So I don't think that the voters should ever be involved in trying to make a statement by making guys wait or doing all that like it all fucking matters in the end. I really don't think it does. Because, again, at the end of the day, he's a Hall of Famer. And again, even if you take those years away, if you take those 2 seasons away, where they got caught for Deflategate and when he got caught for Spygate, and then take the rest of Bill Belichick's career into account, he's still a Hall of Fame head coach. Maybe he's not, he's still going to get in a first ballot Hall of Famer. He would still have, I think he has 4 Super Bowls as a head coach, and I think he has a couple more as an assistant coach. So, he's going to get in no matter what. And, even if you want to take away those years and act like you really care about that, and you're not just trying to make a statement to try to assert some power that you think you have. So, that's the part where I'm like, if you're, and because here's the question, right? And I think I saw this on Twitter or something like that I think was a perfect point. That are they going to be able to do that when Tom Brady is up for being in the Pro Football Hall of Fame? Because if you do it to Bill Belichick, you have to do it to Tom Brady too, right? Because he was a part of both of those. He was part of both of those. He was there. He was the quarterback for those teams. And especially if you believe that, I believe that Tom Brady definitely was a part of the whole Deflategate scenario. There was no way that was happening without him knowing about it whatsoever. So if you're going to make Bill Belichick wait for a year, you have to make Tom Brady wait for a year. And guess what's not going to fucking happen? They're not going to make Tom Brady, who's considered the greatest quarterback to ever play in the NFL, winningest for sure. Nobody's, I guess, greatest is winningness. So nobody's going to make Tom Brady wait for a year. So if you're going to do that to Bill Belichick, you better do that for Tom Brady, but that's not going to happen to Tom Brady. So if that's going to be the case, then you have to let Bill Belichick in on the first year. And I just think that the Hall of Fame voters are taking a stand and trying to make a statement with what they're doing, and it's just not what your job is. That's not your fucking job. Your job is to look at their careers and look what they did and decide, hey, are they good enough to be in or not? And that should be all that it is. And when they go and try to do other stuff, with the TO thing and trying to make him wait in the Hall of Fame because they didn't like him, or all this other stuff, and making such certain guys wait because you didn't like him, or whatever the situation is, that's not what your job is. It's just not. And I believe this when it comes to all of the Hall of Fames and all of that. You should not, again, I think it gets a little bit hairy when you're starting to talk about the steroid era and all that in the MLB. But I think overall the MLB let it happen, so I think that those players should still be let in, because if the MLB didn't want it to happen, they benefited from it when it comes to making baseball as prominent as it was at the time, because these guys were smashing home runs all over the place. So why should you have to make them pay because the MLB wanted to take advantage of the situation before they decided, hey, it's been enough now. We should probably have the hammer on this. So overall, it should not be the jobs of these voting people to make statements like this and try to do it that way. Your job is to do what you got to do and vote them in if they deserve to be in. And Bill Belichick deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer as a coach in the NFL. No questions asked. And it just sucks when these voters decide they want to do some shit like this, and it doesn't make any sense to me. All right. That's it on that. Next story. The Bills promote offensive coordinator Joe Brady to be the head coach on a 5-year deal. So here's my thing about this. They fire Doug McDermott after they had lost the AFC, lost to Denver in the playoffs, okay? They thought there wasn't enough. And again, I'm not going to rehash the whole thing about McDermott taking the fall while the GM still gets to keep his job and all of that. You can go back to past episodes of the pod and listen to me complain about that. But I don't know how you look at that scenario and how it played out for Josh Allen offensively and all of that, where like you could tell the team was an issue. Like the actual players not having enough talent around Josh Allen was the definite issue. And then you fire Doug McDermott, and then when you have a chance to go hire anybody else you want, right? You land on the OC that was already in the room when you lost the game that you lost, that you thought was bad enough to fire Doug McDermott for. That's the part that I don't get. Because if you think that they weren't doing enough to get them over the hump, Doug McDermott, who got them to 7 straight playoff appearances and being one of the best teams in the NFL over these last 7 years and having Josh Allen doing what he's doing, how do you think that Joe Brady, being a brand new head coach in OC, the OC that's been here the last 2 years, that's been the guy with Josh Allen and having the offenses that hasn't done the job as well as he probably need to, again, you probably need to get them some more talent, which is on the GM now, head of football operations, because, you know, he felt like they had enough offensively. And I think he went off during the season on somebody when he was asked about that on a radio show, where he was questioned about whether they had enough talent around Josh Allen to do what they had to do to like win the Super Bowl and do all that. And he had like a big meltdown moment. So I think the fact that you replace McDermott with Joe Brady to be the OC and expect him to do just as much, if not more, and make you take that next step in getting to a Super Bowl and winning a Super Bowl, I just don't get how that makes any sense. Because the offense you'd been running wasn't enough, right? Like, again, Josh Allen, it was enough until Josh Allen had one of his worst days in the playoffs he could possibly have. But I just don't know how you're going to expect Joe Brady to take you on that next step that Doug McDermott hadn't taken you through. It doesn't make any sense to me. Again, I get he's an offensive guy, and I think that maybe with him at the helm, you're going to be more likely to want to draft more offensive pieces to help out Josh Allen. But again, you should have been doing that anyway. And it was reported that Doug McDermott said that they didn't have enough pieces offensively to help out Josh Allen to go win a Super Bowl like they need to. And you also have to give Doug McDermott some credit because he was the guy calling the defense on a weekly basis. And he was, even with lesser talent on the defensive side, he was still getting them to play some very good ball. Again, in the playoffs, it didn't work out all that well. I think they were averaging, like the defense was giving up like 30 points a game in the playoffs. With obviously him at the helm, but they were obviously a lack of talent as well on that side of the ball too. So I just don't know how this makes any sense to me. It just doesn't. Again, I get it. Joe Brady was up for other jobs. I think he was a real candidate to be the head coach for the Raiders. So if you really think if you really didn't want to lose him, and I'm guessing Josh Allen didn't want to lose him that bad, you were going to have to make him the head coach. You weren't going to be able to keep him if you didn't promote him. But I just don't know. Again, if you're saying that your main issue was the coaching and not the GM and the drafting part of it, then I don't know how you just promoting an OC that was already there when you weren't getting where you needed to go is going to get you on that next step. I just don't know how that's going to be the case. But, it is what it is. They went through the guys they needed to try to interview, and they decided Joe Brady was the best person to do it. I just don't know how that was. That was the answer you came to after firing Doug McDermott after doing what he did for the Bills over the last 7 years or so. I just don't know how that's the answer, but it is what it is. McCarthy. Oh man, McCarthy is now the head coach for the Steelers. This news came out I think this came out on Friday, right? The day after I potted on Thursday. No, sorry. Was this on Saturday? It came out the day after I potted, so I didn't have a chance to actually react to this and all of that. Actually, no, this came out on Saturday because I podcasted that last Friday night. So it came out on Saturday that he was going to be the head coach for the Steelers. Okay, I was very emotional when it first came out. I was mad, and when I looked at it, I'm still peeved by it because I'm sitting there like I just don't know how this is going to be the long-term answer. News came out, I was not happy because I looked at it and thought about the fact that he had been a head coach at two different spots, one being with Aaron Rodgers in the prime of his career. And I think McCarthy had not only Brett Favre, and then he was able to gifted Aaron Rodgers to be the quarterback that he was. And the fact that he only got to one Super Bowl was a definite issue with the guy of the talent of Aaron Rodgers. And they only got to one. They did win the one they got to, but it definitely was not very, not very good for what talent you had at the quarterback position, especially with Mike McCarthy being an offensive guy. And then he gets fired from that job. He ends up getting the Cowboys job, I think he has 3 straight years of 12-5 seasons, and then does nothing in the playoffs. And then it was also kind of like, marred by some in-game issues when it comes to timeouts and all of that, where it's like kind of bad football being coached by him. And then he ends up getting fired from there. Again, he did a good job with the Cowboys. I don't think he should have been fired when he was there because I think he was doing what he needed to do. And then he wasn't necessarily, again, the Cowboys were good throughout the regular season and didn't do well in the playoffs. It was what it was, right? But it turned out that, Jerry Jones wasn't willing to pay Mike McCarthy what he probably needed to get paid as the head coach there. And that's how it ended there. And that's why he had not had a job this past season. And then now he ends up getting more opportunities for a head coaching position. And then, the Steelers are the team that hires him. On its face, I'm not very happy about the hire as a Steelers fan because Mike McCarthy, his offense isn't very new. Again, he runs good offenses. It's just they do what they need to do. But it's not particularly it's not very creative. It's very vanilla in the offenses that he runs. He did it at both with the Packers and with the Cowboys. And every spot he's done it with quarterbacks that he's been handed good quarterback play. With Aaron Rodgers and with Dak Prescott. Again, I've had my issues with Dak Prescott, but I can't sit here and say that Dak Prescott isn't a good starting quarterback in the NFL. I just can't. In a way, do I think he's the best in the big moments? Probably not, but I think overall Dak Prescott is more than a good quarterback in the NFL for the most part. More likely than not, top 10, no matter what year that he's been playing in. So now he's going to be coming to the Steelers to be the head coach at 62 years old, so much older than, again, the past 50 years. Pittsburgh has hired 3 coaches. They've all been in their 30s, and they have been there for 15-plus years, right? So definitely outside of what the Steelers usually do when it comes to their hiring practices the last 50 years when it comes to a head coach. And also different when it comes to Mike McCarthy being an offensive guy rather than going defensive, which is defensive-minded, which is what they've done the last 3 times that they've hired a head coach. And it's just Mike McCarthy is going to now have to bring back Aaron Rodgers for another year, which I think is a total disaster, and you shouldn't do. You just shouldn't do it. Aaron Rodgers is now 42, I think 43 years old by the time the season starts, and bringing him back for another season doesn't make any sense to me, especially with the fact that him and Aaron Rodgers, that relationship went sour, which is why he was fired from the Packers from the first place. Him and Aaron Rodgers did not work out all that well. And I think I read this story that during the time where Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy were there with the Packers at the same time, is one of the things that annoyed Aaron Rodgers the most about him was that he called him a low IQ football guy. He has a low football IQ as a head coach, and that was what annoyed Aaron Rodgers about him. On one hand, if Aaron Rodgers is correct and this guy is low IQ, why do I want that guy to be my head coach at 62 years old? But on the other hand, okay, fine, he may be low IQ and maybe not good enough for Aaron Rodgers, but why, if he's now the head coach for the Steelers, why would he want Aaron Rodgers to come back? Or why would Aaron Rodgers want to be coached by that guy again, who the fact that they didn't get along the first time? I just don't know. And not to mention, I just don't want it. I would like for that not to happen, especially with, we can't go back on the Mike McCarthy thing. He's there. He signed a 5-year deal today. So, he's not going anywhere. So I really don't want that to become a thing with Aaron Rodgers coming back and playing for another year. It's time to take your medicine and go either especially since you hired your offensive-minded guy, go draft a quarterback or go bring in Will Howard. You have Will Howard on your roster. Let him be the guy for a year and see if he can develop him, or go draft a different guy to try to develop. Take the fucking medicine. Don't try to run this back with Aaron Rodgers again. It's not going to work for anybody. And I get it. They don't want to have to tear down the roster. They don't want to have to do a rebuild. The Steelers don't believe in rebuilds. But I'm just it's not an inspiring hire at all. And again, I get it. His resume, McCarthy's resume, is not as bad as what people think that it is. And that him and Harbaugh are very close when it comes to the resumes that they have as a head coach and on the NFL level. For sure, fine, I can totally understand that. But if Mike Tomlin just stepped down and now you're hiring Mike McCarthy to be your next head coach, it's a downgrade in head coach. Again, I get it's a little bit a different philosophy being an offensive guy now, so maybe the offense will now be better. But Mike McCarthy is nowhere near the head coach that Mike Tomlin is. And I'm not sure if Mike McCarthy is going to give you enough offensively when it comes to being the leader of the offense. He's not going to change the offense enough to make up for that gap when it comes to what they are as a head coach. At least I don't think so. If he turns out to do so, then I will eat crow when or if that does happen. But the way I look at it right now, I just don't think that's the case. So I'm not feeling great about the hire. I'm really not. Again, I get the idea that they want to go offensive minded, but you could have went for a young offensive minded guy. There's still young offensive minded guys out there that haven't gotten head coaching jobs that you could have went with. And again, I get it. If you went that route, then you might have to, it's a long-term deal. You're going to have to be willing to maybe have some bad seasons to start with. And they don't want to do that. They want to keep going with the roster that they have. I get that. I totally do. But I think that the roster you have hasn't been getting you there in the first place. So I don't know how you're going to change this roster on top of bringing Mike McCarthy in to get it NFL ready to where it's able to go out there and be competitive in the playoffs next season. I just don't know how it's going to happen. And I don't think Mike McCarthy is going to have this amazing coaching job to get that same offense to doing what it needs to do. So I just don't know how they're going to get with where they want to go with having Mike McCarthy as the guy. Even though I could totally understand he probably is a coach worthy of being in the NFL, but here's my thing, right? This is my last thing on him before, and I know this is going to sound crazy, okay? And again, I am a big guy myself, okay? So I'm not sitting here fat shaming anybody. I have no right to. But I looked at Mike McCarthy when he was doing his press conference today in that suit that looked way too small. And I looked at him talking, and the eyes a little bit iffy. They're not necessarily all that straight. Like they have one little lazy eye, and he has a really big face, no neck. Why did I get this feeling that, why do I have Jabba the Hutt coaching my football team? I know it's insane. I know it's incredibly mean. And I know it sounds like a little bit of fat shaming, but no, I swear, I am fat myself. I cannot blame this. I cannot fat shame anybody by any means. But I couldn't help but look at this man doing that press conference, and I'm like, Jabba the Hutt's fucking coaching the Pittsburgh goddamn Steelers. What are we doing? What are we doing? I know it sounds insane, but if you hear this, go watch that press conference and watch him talk as he was like being announced as Steelers head coach. And I think you'd understand if you've watched Star Wars at all. That was the feeling that I got. That was the first thought that I had in my brain, and I definitely did not like it. It made me feel even more sad about my situation. Ugh, it was gross. I just couldn't. Once I thought about it, I couldn't get it out. It was awful, man. I just don't know what to feel about it. I don't know how to feel any sort of confidence about anything going into next year. And again, the season just ended, and technically it's not even over. It's ended for the Steelers, but it's not even over because we still have a Super Bowl to have to go watch. But, I don't know. I'm not feeling great about the whole situation in Pittsburgh, to be honest with you. Getting off of him, let's see. I think I talked about Mike McDaniel already being the OC for the Chargers. He's officially been announced, so he's going to be there. He's not going to be taking any head coaching jobs. So good for him that he'll be able to go be the OC for Herbert, and I think he'll be able to turn around that offense. And I think that'll be potentially a match made in heaven. So I do think that's going to be a good hire for him. I already mentioned, what am I forgetting? Brian Daboll, former coach for the Giants. And before that, he was the OC for the Bills. And apparently he was a potential option as the next head coach for the Buffalo Bills, but they decided to go with Joe Brady instead, who was their OC, to an internal hire. So Daboll instead is going to be the new OC for the Tennessee Titans. And I think he had also hired Daboll, before taking this job, had also had a second interview for the Raiders as well. So if he ends up getting that job, I think he will end up being able to take that job if he wants it. But as of right now, he's going to be the OC for the Tennessee Titans. Working under Robert Saleh, who is now going to be the head coach for the Tennessee Titans and all of that. So how do I feel? I think that if Daboll being the OC for the Titans, having his quarterback in Cam Ward, if they can get some real offensive pieces and get some talent around Cam Ward, I do think it can be a very good match made in heaven. Because he was able to, turn around Josh Allen and kind of make him the NFL quarterback that he is today. And then I don't think Cam Ward needs necessarily all that work to kind of be turned into a good starting level NFL quarterback. I think Cam Ward had shown plenty of that in his rookie season, even without all the talent around him that he probably needs. But I do think with Daboll being able to put an offense together, if they can get some real offensive pieces, on top of the fact that you have Saleh kind of working the defensive side of the ball, especially with him being able to do more with less, which is what he's done plenty of times throughout his NFL career, especially with San Fran this past season. Like, he was doing more with less all throughout this season, was able to get really good I'm not going to say high-level play, but like really good level play out of his defense, even without all the star players that he was missing throughout the year for San Francisco. And I think if he can do a little bit of that, maybe get a few pieces for Tennessee to kind of like get them started, and then him kind of work his magic on the defensive side, I do think it could be a very good match made in heaven. Again, as long as they don't let Daboll kind of like start running Cam Ward all over the place, but that's not the kind of quarterback Cam Ward is. And I think that when you compare Cam Ward to Jackson Dart, I think Cam Ward is a much more talented passer of the football than Jackson Dart is from the get-go. So I think Daboll will be less likely to want to, hit that red button of trying to like use Cam Ward to run the football around like he did with Jackson Dart those last few weeks of the season this past year. Well, at least it wasn't the last few weeks of the season. It was during those last few weeks as the head coach there, because he got fired early from being the head coach there. So he won't be nearly as tempted to do that with Cam Ward as he was Jackson Dart, because I do think Cam Ward has a lot more talented of an arm, and he's able to do a lot more throwing the football early on in his NFL career. I think Jackson Dart can get there, but I think Jackson Dart has a little bit more developing to do in comparison to what Cam Ward can do throwing the football now, which I think Cam Ward is definitely ahead in that aspect. So Daboll on the offensive side, kind of managing everything, kind of getting Cam Ward up to snuff, on top of getting some more talented guys around him. And then you have Robert Saleh kind of running the defense, obviously running the whole team, but getting the defense in order, maybe having a little bit less talent there, I think he'll be able to do a little bit more with less on the defensive side of the ball. I think they can really do some things there. Again, they have a weird ownership scenario. The the GM situation is a little bit weird there as well. But I do think when it comes to head coach down, I do think they might have a little bit of a good scenario going here. Again, this is all they need to get really draft some talent. They need talent on both sides of the roster. Like they really need to like get this next 2 or 3 drafts right if they really want to turn this team around and really spend some good money in the offseason and like get some free agents in to kind of help out their team. So as long as they can do that, I do think that they might have the right coaching staff to kind of get things going in the opposite direction, like actually winning football games, like unlike what the Titans have been doing the last couple of years. On top of the fact, I think the Titans have a top 5 pick this year. Yeah, Tennessee is the 4th pick overall in the draft, so they're going to be able to start with a really high-level draft pick no matter what they choose, offensive or defensive. I think they could definitely help whoever they draft at that spot. They'll be able to get a very good piece to help out, like be another pillar for their team for years to come. So I really do think that that can be a really good spot with having Daboll and Saleh there doing their things. I really do think that can be a very good situation for Cam Ward to kind of have some real good coaching around him, both offensively and defensively, to kind of get that team figured out. Again, still got a draft, so we got a lot of guys in there to kind of help him out. But I do think that can be they can turn Tennessee around here in the next couple of years without much of an issue. I do think they at least have the blueprints down. They have to follow through on them, but I do think there is a roadmap there to kind of get Tennessee back to where they're playing relevant football. Any other stories I want to talk about before I get to the recapping the games? I don't think so. Boom, boom. No. No, I'm good. There's other stories I want to talk about before I got to recapping these games. So let's go ahead and get to recapping them. So we had 2 games this past Sunday. Those being the AFC and NFC championship games. And let's go ahead and recap them. Talk about them as I go. Watch them both very intently because, wasn't much else to do because we were all pretty much stuck in our houses because of the crazy snowstorm that was going on here. So I watched them very intently. I'll go ahead and recap them as we go. Let me tell you, one game was definitely a lot more entertaining to watch than the other. So because of that, I'll start with the game that was first. That was also the least entertaining. So kind of get through that and then get to the fun game second. So let's go ahead and start with the more boring one for sure. New England Patriots beat the Denver Broncos 10-7. This was a slogfest of a game. It looked like it could have been a little explosive early on in the first half, especially with Jarrett Stidham hit that first pass for like the big gain. I was like, oh, maybe they can really get something going here, but it didn't work out that way. It was much of a slogfest of a game. Again, the second half definitely didn't help with all the crazy snow that started coming down. I think it was so much snow that it made it hard to see. It was enough snow falling that it made it hard to play normal game of football as it was going. So like the weather was definitely part to blame for how bad the second half was. But I think that these two teams were not necessarily playing that high level of football. To be told, even that first half where the weather was good, everything was fine. They only scored those 14 points in that first half. Like the only 2 touchdowns that were scored were in that first half. Let's start with the winners here. Drake May was the winning quarterback, but I don't think he played necessarily all that great of football. Drake May, 10 of 21 for 86 yards, sacked 5 times. He also had 10 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown, so that he was able to pull off the 1 touchdown that the Patriots did score in this game. But again, that touchdown came off of was it a muffed punt? No. Was it a muffed punt that got them that field position? Or am I thinking about the Seattle game? No, it was the pick, wasn't it? Oh, now I gotta check. Hold on, give me a second here. All plays was in that first half. There was a fumble. Yep. Yeah, so it was off a fumble that Stidham had back in their own red zone. All right, so the one touchdown that the Patriots had scored was because Jarrett Stidham, deep in his own territory, had fumbled the football after getting sacked, which is what allowed for the Patriots to get that one touchdown that they had. But otherwise, the Patriots offense didn't do all that much at all. They did run the football relatively well, but again, it was like, especially with that second half, all the Patriots did was run the football because they just didn't want to ruin the game because they had the lead and everything. Ramondre Stevenson, 25 carries, 71 yards. Already mentioned Drake May running the football, 10 carries, 65 yards and a touchdown. Trevion Henderson, 3 carries, 5 yards. Receiving the football, Mac Hollins, 2 catches, 51 yards, and one of those catches was like a 31-yard catch off of like a flea flicker that they were able to pull off in the second half. And that kind of led them to the field goal range to get the field goal that broke the tie that was going on in the third quarter. Stephon Diggs, 5 catches, 17 yards. Hunter Henry, 2 catches, 12 yards. Again, the Patriots offense was nothing to really write home about at all in this game. Again, you have to give a little bit of that to the Broncos defense because the Broncos defense really did dominate in that first half when the weather was not a part of this whatsoever. And I think Drake May wasn't throwing the football all that well at all, even when conditions were even good. Again, you have to give Denver a little bit of credit there for causing that. But the Patriots didn't do all that much. Again, they did what they had to do to win the game, which at this point of the season, that's all you have to do. You win, you go on. Style points don't matter. All that matters is winning the football game that you have in front of you to go ahead and be able to play another game. So the Patriots did what they're supposed to do defensively. I don't think their defense had all that hard of a job because of how bad Jarrett Stidham played. Again, he had the one play that he had it was like a 30. Hold on, it was like the 52-yard throw that he had to Marvin Mims. But outside of that, Jarrett Stidham didn't do shit in this game. And in that first half where the Broncos, I think they were up 7-0, they had a chance to go up 10-0. Late on, I think I was late on in that second quarter. Let me see here, make sure I had it right. I probably should have rewatched this game before I podcasted, but it is what it is. So let's see here. I think this was in the punt. Turnover on downs. Yeah, in the second quarter with about 9 minutes left, the Denver managed to put together a pretty good drive. It was a 43-yard drive. They were able to go down the field and get into the red zone of the Patriots, right? And then got all the way down and ended up getting to a 4th down, and let's see here. Ended up being 4th and 1 at the New England 14, okay? And then at that point, you have a choice. You're up 7-0. And Sean Payton looked at that play, look at their spot, and said, "There, it's 4th and 1. We can either kick the field goal where our defense is controlling the offense for Drake May and the Patriots. Like, the defense was playing lights out in the first half, right? And Sean Payton had the opportunity just to hit a field goal and go up 10-0 and be up 2 scores, which is a big deal, especially in that game when how bad the Patriots offense was looking early on in that game. I think that was probably something I would have done, right? But Sean Payton looked at this scenario and decided, hey, I want to go for it on 4th down. I want to try to get 7 more points and go up 14-0 because he felt like 10 points wasn't going to be enough to win this game, which I think, based off of how it played out, I think hindsight being 2020, 10 points would have been plenty because, the Patriots scored 10 points and won the game. So I did not agree with the decision because of how much the defense for Denver was dominating this game. And the fact that even with that one big play that Jarrett Stidham had, the offense was not doing that well for the Broncos. And the fact that you were controlling the game defensively, and that just having those other 3 points to go up 10-0, being up 2 scores against that Patriots offense that was doing absolutely nothing in this game, I think would have been a really good position for the Broncos. They potentially could have won this game, especially on how that second half went with the weather going as bad as it was and everything. I think they could have won this game. But Sean Payton being too aggressive at that moment, again, without his quarterback, you have to bring into effect that Bo Nix got hurt the week before, breaking his ankle and all that. Now you're playing with Jarrett Stidham. But and every time that you heard Sean Payton talk about it, he was trying to show the utmost confidence in Jarrett Stidham. Again, I get it. What else are you supposed to say? Like, he's going to be ass? So I get the idea that you can't necessarily go out there and say, I have no faith in Jarrett Stidham. But I'm just like, in that moment, you have to read the game as it was going at that moment and be like, hey, my defense is suffocating the Patriots. Jarrett Stidham's not playing all that great. He had the one big pass, but otherwise he didn't really do much. We can't really run the football that effectively right now. So, like, why wouldn't you go ahead and take the 3 points that you had and go up 2 scores? Again, it's kind of also taking into effect that you make the field goal and all that, but it was a pretty short field goal. The weather was fine. So, like, as long as you make the field goal, you're going up 10-0. And you're up 2 scores, and I think you have a really good commanding lead in that game. And he didn't take it, and I think that was the difference between the Denver Broncos winning or losing that game. I really do. Because they go up 10-0, I don't think the Patriots come back and win this game. I just don't think that was going to be the case. And I think you play that game a lot differently, and then the Patriots don't get the fumble that they got out of Denver, and Jarrett Stidham be able to kind of come back and get that 7 points in that second quarter. But I just think that overall, I think that decision that Sean Payton made was the difference between winning and losing that game, and he made the wrong decision. I really do think so. Getting to the Denver Broncos side, outside of the bad decision that Sean Payton made, Jarrett Stidham, 17 of 31, 133 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Running the football, they didn't really do much of it. They ran the football for 79 total yards. R.J. Harvey, 13 carries, 37 yards. Jarrett Stidham, 4 carries, 23 yards. Running the football didn't really work out all that well. Marvin Mims, 4 catches, 62 yards. He had the long 52-yard catch. That was the biggest play in the whole game. R.J. Harvey, 4 catches for 22 yards. Evan Ingram had 2 catches for 19. Cortland Sutton, 3 catches, 17 yards in the touchdown. Like, you can tell, like, it's just, in this game, you could tell very quickly, other than that one big pass, like, he did that early on in the game. I thought, oh, maybe they have something here, but it was, like, very apparent quickly after that Jarrett Stidham did not have what they needed to win this game at all, at least offensively. But again, even with Jarrett Stidham playing as bad as he did, they could have won this game. They really could have. And that's the part that sucks about it, is because as much as I totally believe that Jarrett Stidham, I didn't think he was going to play awesome in this game, but I thought they had a chance to manage it if with their defense did what they were supposed to do. And I think the defense for the Broncos did what they were supposed to do in this game. I can't blame the Broncos defense. They held the Patriots to 10 points. And again, the only reason they got 10 points was because Jarrett Stidham had a sack fumble earlier, like in the second quarter, that gave the New England Patriots the one drive that they had the touchdown in. It was a short touchdown drive. Like, that was the only reason they even got the 10 points that they got. So, again, it's just like, again, the Denver Broncos, Bo Nix got hurt last week. And then coming into this game with Jarrett Stidham, I had no faith that the Broncos were going to win this game, but I think there was an opportunity there. And I think Sean Payton got too aggressive in the moment, that he had the chance to go ahead and, like, really put himself in a winning spot to win this game, and he didn't. And sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes it is just like, hey, you make one wrong decision and it can kind of lose you the whole game. I think that's what happened in this scenario. But credit to the Patriots, though. They managed. They did what they had to do, especially in that second half where the weather was so bad. They got the 3 points early on in that third quarter, and that was all they needed to go up 10-7, and they managed the rest of the game. Again, I think they managed it by not letting Drake May throw all that much, because they were like, hey, he wasn't throwing that well when the weather was good, but now the weather is bad. We're not going to let him throw. We're going to run the football like crazy, run this clock out, because the Denver Broncos offense couldn't do anything, like literally zero, zilch, nada in the second half to score any points. So, credit to credit to Mike Vrabel for managing the game the way he needed to. Credit to Drake May. Heck, on that last drive that they had, all they needed was a first down to win it, and they went for like a bootleg and let Drake May run it for the first down to kind of ice the game rather than having to punt the ball back off to Denver. Again, even if they had to punt the ball back to Denver, Denver wasn't going to do anything in that moment. So I'm not sitting here saying if the Patriots had to punt the ball back to Denver that Denver would have found a way to win the game. I don't think that was going to happen with how bad their offense was playing. But I think I do give some credit to the fact that you saw a moment where you can go ice the game yourself and end the game with the football in your own hands, and they did what they had to do, and they won the game. So credit to Vrabel, credit to the Patriots. Again, as much as I don't like the Patriots, I don't like the fans. Their fans are insane. The fact that they have all come to become a real cult-like following of Drake May, calling him their next Tom Brady and all that kind of makes me yuck inside. But again, if I will be rooting for Seattle to win that Super Bowl because I just think the world is a better place when the Patriots are not on top of it. So, and plus I think the Patriots deserve a lot more. Their fans deserve a lot more down years than what they've been getting over the last. I think they've been down for 5 years, and now they're back in the Super Bowl again with Drake May. Not enough. I think they deserve a lot more down years. But I think that the only consolation prize I'm going to get in this scenario is the Patriots losing the Super Bowl. So I'll be rooting for Seattle to win. But I do, even if the overall, I do have to give Vrabel a lot of credit. He's a Buckeye. I think he's a very good head coach. I have to give him a lot of credit for turning this team around the way that he has in one season, to kind of do what he's supposed to do and kind of get Drake May to playing as good a football as he was playing and managing the defense too. Because again, it's not like they have a ton of dudes all over the place. They had to bring in guys off from free agency and draft some guys, and he's gotten them all play under Stephon Diggs. He got him in as a free agent. He's got them all playing for one goal, one purpose. And I do have to give Vrabel a lot of credit for that, for turning around that culture the way he did so quickly. So, but yeah, I have to give them a lot of credit, and give the Patriots a lot of credit for winning this game because, again, it was ugly, but they did what they had to do to get the job done. So that's it on that. Let's go ahead and go to the NFC Championship game. This game was so much better. This is a much better game to watch. Seriously, all over the place. This game was so much better to watch. Let's get to the winners first, and then we'll get to the Rams part of it. Sam Darnold had an awesome game. He was great. He was awesome. I thought the oblique was going to be an issue. It didn't turn out to be in this game. He went 25 of 36 for 346 yards and 3 touchdowns. You have Kenneth Walker, the running back. He had 19 carries for 62 yards and a touchdown. And then on top of that, he also had he had 4 catches for 49 yards receiving as well. So Kenneth Walker had an awesome day. Receiving wise, JSN came out and he had an awesome day. He was great. He was amazing. Again, watching him play that way as obviously me being a Buckeye fan, watching him as a Buckeye and seeing him have that crazy day that he had in the Rose Bowl, having 347 yards that game receiving. And knowing what kind of day he can have if you give him that opportunity, I knew this was possible. But again, watch him do that against the Rams on Sunday night was absolutely insane. He had 10 catches, 153 yards, and a touchdown. He was unstoppable. And it felt like they kept moving him around. They could never get a full, the defense for the Rams never got a full hand on what they were trying to do with him. And then every time that they thought they had something figured out with trying to lock down JSN, he made a big play and got the job done. And he was all over the place. He had an awesome game, and he did a great job. Rashid Shaheed, 1 catch, 51 yards. He had the one big play, literally 1 catch, 51 yards. Early on in that game, it was a big play that led on literally the first drive for Seattle to get them to score that early touchdown. But again, that one play had a huge impact. And again, he's used to that because he's been making most of his plays recently in the return game. But I think the Rams made it their prerogative to make sure Rashid Shaheed did not impact this game returning the football, which is they kept kicking the ball out of the end zone and all of that. So they were making sure, and kicking it out of bounds as well, punting. So they were making sure that Shaheed was not going to do anything returning the football in this game. But when he got his opportunity in the game to catch that one ball for the big play on that opening drive, he did. It was an awesome play. He just burned this corner that he was facing. Easy cooking for the 51-yard catch. Like I already mentioned, Kenneth Walker for the 4 catches, 49 yards. Cooper Kupp, 4 catches, 36 yards and a touchdown. He made a big impact on this game. It was very nice to see him play as good as he did, especially in that second half. He kind of bossed up and had a really good second half to kind of help Seattle finish this game off. Jake Bobo, 1 catch, 17 yards and a touchdown. He came in literally for I think a couple plays, but in the red zone when JSN had, I think JSN was in that game, or was it Cooper Kupp? I'm not sure. But Jake Bobo came in that one red zone attempt that they had. I think this was in like the third quarter or the second quarter. Hold on. Let me check here. Scoring plays. No. In the third quarter. Third quarter, 17-yard catch from Jake Bobo for the touchdown. There's a lot of people that bet on him to score the touchdown in that moment. They got some crazy odds on that. I think it was like plus 2,000 or something like that. A lot of big tickets cashed on that when it comes to betting if you were doing it that night on Jake Bobo to get that touchdown catch. But so like all in all, the Seattle Seahawks offense was awesome in this game. They did everything they had to do. Sam Darnold had an absolutely amazing game. He literally dominated from start to finish. And it's crazy because it's not like, the defense for Seattle stopped Matthew Stafford. Like, Matthew Stafford still had an awesome day. But it was just Sam Darnold was just that much better than Matthew Stafford in this game, which is not something I would have thought could happen coming into this game, where like it wasn't like if Seattle's defense had controlled the game, I would have been less surprised, but that isn't what happened. Matthew Stafford got his. Like, he in that offense did what they were supposed to in this game, scoring 27 points, but it was Sam Darnold in the offense with JSN and Kenneth Walker making enough plays to score 31 points on that Rams defense, and that's how they won this game. Again, they were also helped by the fact there was a special teams mess up on the Rams' part that got Seattle an instant touchdown, which I'll talk about here in a second. But Seattle overall offensively played an awesome game led by Sam Darnold, and you have to give Sam Darnold a lot of credit for that, and JSN as well. JSN was a dog in that game. There was nothing the Rams could do to stop him. And then defensively for the Seahawks, they didn't necessarily do a great job. Again, it wasn't like, there were points where there was like that second game where they were able to hold Matthew Stafford to not necessarily having a great game, but it was still like Matthew Stafford had done enough through 3 quarters for them to win. And then the Seahawks finally made, I think it was that in that second meeting later on in the season. Wasn't that the last game of the year? No, before that. It was a second to last game of the year, I think. The Thursday night game where Seattle defensively held down Matthew Stafford and kind of kept him to not as good of a day as he usually would have. But that wasn't what happened. Seattle defense, and especially when there was one point where Devon Witherspoon, was it Witherspoon? Let me make sure I'm not crazy. Or is it Tariq? No, not Tariq Woolen. It was Tariq Woolen, I think. So there was a point in this game where, let's see here. Let me make sure I have it right when that play happened. I think it was in the fourth. Nope, not that one. In the third quarter? Yeah, third quarter. Late in the third quarter where it was 31-20, and Seattle had an 11-point lead. It looks like they were starting to take control in that game, where literally the next drive, it was right after Seattle had scored a touchdown to go up that 11 points, where LA got the ball back, and they were about to go on a 3 and out. Like, seriously, it was a 5-play drive. They were about to go for 3 and out, and then on the, am I crazy? Yeah, 3 and out. They were about to do it, and Tariq Woolen was going towards the other team, going towards the LA Rams bench, talking smack. Who knows what he ever actually said, because nobody will ever know. But apparently it was too much for the referee, and he called a flag that gave the Rams a 15-yard penalty that kept their drive going. And then literally the next play that they had, they burned Tariq Woolen to it was Puka Nacua getting a 37-yard touchdown catch. Let me make sure I'm not crazy. A 34-yard touchdown pass from Matthew Stafford to Puka Nacua, and he burned Tariq Woolen on that play. So, at that point, I can say that Tariq Woolen had a really bad 3-play stretch that led to the Rams getting back into this game. And, it looks like it went from Seattle having really good control over this game, having a good lead, to the Rams, especially if they were able to get that stop and, go and get the ball back, being up 11, to giving the Rams really a second chance of life and being down only 4 at that point by getting that touchdown pass to Puka Nacua. So other than that, Seattle they tried to do what they were supposed to do, but they tried to make it hard. But again, the Seattle defense, again, when Matthew Stafford and the LA Rams team was playing like that, there was no way that Seattle was going to be able to hold the Rams down like that in that game with how good that they were playing. But again, it was like in that one, it was literally one specific play, I think, that really changed the game. And it was on the muffed punt. I think it was in the... I keep having to go back to the play-by-play because I keep forgetting when it happened. Yeah, so it was in the beginning of the third quarter, I believe. Yeah, so it was beginning of the third quarter. Seattle gets the ball first, and they go 3 and out. I think it was 1, boom, boom. Short right to very Jared first. It was they went 5. They got a first down, and then they quick first down, and then they went 3 and out. And then they had to punt the ball to the Rams. And this was, at this point, the Seattle was up 17-13. Okay, so it really was still a close game at that point and everything. And then the Seattle punts the football to the Rams, and then it was, I forget who muffed it. It was Xavier. Is it Xavier Smith? Yeah, Xavier Smith, the wide receiver for the Rams, goes and muffs the punt, and he looked like he was like about to catch it. It looked like he misjudged it and then had to take a few steps backward. And once it happened, he kind of tripped and then touched the football. Seahawks fall on it, and then literally score a touchdown right after that in one play to go up 24-13. That really kind of led to them having the lead for the rest of the game and not really giving it up. Hold on, did they give it up at any point? 24-13. No, yeah, at that point, they never gave up the lead again. So it was literally that play exactly that kind of gave Seattle the lead that they never gave back to the Rams. And I think that was the difference in this game, to be totally honest with you, because I think otherwise the Rams defense, as much as I think they got smoked all over the place by Sam Darnold and JSN, like, they didn't make any crazy bad mistakes. They were trying to make it hard on Seattle. They were getting theirs, but like the Rams were in it and they had a chance. All they needed was one stop to kind of like take the lead at one point, and they had a chance to. It's literally the start of that third quarter when all they had to do was get that punt from the Seahawks, and they would have had a chance 13-17 to kind of go score a touchdown to go up finally in this game. And they couldn't make it happen because of the muff punt. And I feel like that was that was the turning point in this game that went from the LA Rams having a real chance to take control of that game to the Seattle then taking the lead and then just never giving it back to the Rams. So I think, again, just like the game before, that there was literally one play that really turned the tide of this game that I think that once that happened, the Rams really had, again, they had a chance to come back and win, but they didn't. Because it felt like they lost their opportunity to when they had their prime spot. But getting to the Rams side of things, Matthew Stafford played a good game, man. 22 of 35 for 374 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks. Only got sacked 1 time. The Rams, like Matthew Stafford and that offensive line, did a great job of making sure Matthew Stafford stayed straight up. Again, either him getting the ball out too quick for the Seattle defensive line to get after him, or that offensive line did a great job in protecting him and make sure he was able to stay upright and be able to get the ball where he needed to go. They did a great job of holding up against the pass rush. Running the football wise, they did a great job as well. Blake Corum, 9 carries, 55 yards. Kyren Williams, 10 catches, 39 yards. Matthew Stafford had 2 carries for 16 yards, something he never does. He never runs the football at all himself. And in this game, there was 2 opportunities for him to do so, and he did. Especially late in the game when he was trying to get I think it was a 4th down conversion. I'm not sure, but he had to run the football himself to get a first down, and he did. So, like, they ran the football relatively well in this game against that Seattle defense. They ran the football for 22 carries total for 114 yards. They averaged like 5 yards a carry. So they ran the football really good in this game. Puka Nacua was awesome in this game as well. Like, JSN and Puka Nacua absolutely had a light show when it comes to how good of plays they were making this game. Puka Nacua, 9 catches, 165 yards, and a touchdown. Devontae Adams also had a good game. 4 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown. Parkinson had their tight end, had a really good day. 3 catches, 62 yards. Blake Corum had 3 catches for 24. Kyron Williams had 2 catches for 22 yards and a touchdown. And so, like, the Rams offensively were able to get what they wanted to. Like, they were able to score at will, but it was just they never had a chance to go up in this game based on how the kind of game played out, especially with that muff punt there at the start of the third quarter. Like, the Rams just never had a chance to take the lead and take that spot. But the Rams, Matthew Stafford, like, he didn't have a bad game. The offense didn't have a bad day. They did what they were supposed to do, but it just didn't work out. And like this, Sam Darnold and those Seahawks just played a lot better offensively than the Rams did that day, and that was a really big difference in this game. In the Rams defense, man, I'm just like, I don't know. They were never going to be able to lock down Seattle all the way. I really didn't. I thought there was one chance that they could, is that they could stop the run and be able to, like, maybe make Sam Darnold have to put the game on his back, and maybe you would take a chance that way. But here's the thing. The Rams stopped the run for the most part. Kenneth Walker, 19 carries, 62 yards. He averaged 3.3 yards a carry. He had the 1 touchdown run. But like the Rams stopped the run for the most part. And guess what? The game had to be put in Sam Darnold's back. And guess what he did? He took the ball. He took that game and ran with it, man. He was awesome. Him, JSN, Rashid Shaheed, Kenneth Walker, Cooper Kupp, like, they made the plays to go win the game. And I thought, again, there was one thing that had to be shown, is if Sam Darnold could win the big game in a big moment, if he can put the team on his back and go win it. And that's one thing he really hadn't shown throughout his NFL career so far. And guess what? He had that opportunity in this game, and he took it and ran with it, and he passed the test with flying colors. So a lot of credit to Sam Darnold, a lot of credit to that Seahawks team for, again, they were at home, so they had that momentum behind them. But otherwise, like, they went out and won that game, man. They did. And again, this wasn't like the Rams having a bad day or Matthew Stafford not doing what he needed to do. This was Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams at their peak powers, man. And the Seahawks withstood that firepower, and they brought their own firepower themselves in Sam Darnold in that passing offense, and they did what they had to do to win the game. So by far, this game was so much more fun to watch than the first one, and I want to bet on this game as well. So it literally came down to the last drive, because I needed Puka Nacua get the last catch. I think I had him for 8+ catches in this game, and he was sitting on 7 until the Rams got the football with like 20-something seconds left, and Matthew Stafford threw that football to Puka Nacua on the first play on that drive to get me the win. I think it was a plus 7,000 bet. I wish I would have bet more money on it. But, like, I was watching this game so intently, and it was an awesome game to watch, man. It really was, even without betting it or anything. It was a great game between two great teams. I think these are two. I went into this game thinking that this was a game that was going to decide the Super Bowl, because I thought whoever won this game would definitely go beat whoever they have to go face from the AFC side in the Super Bowl. And it looks like it'll be the Seahawks, man. I really do think so. I think the Seahawks team, I think it's their year. And I think Sam Darnold, after he played the way he played in this game, I'm like, I am not feeling negative about, I don't have any questions about him at all going into that game against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. I really don't. I really do think he can go in there and put the team on his back and go out there and win that game if they need him to. Again, will they try to? I don't think so. I think they will try to run the football. I think they'll still try to have that same approach. But if it comes down to it and they need him to throw the football to win and throw it to JSN and Rashid Shaheed and Cooper Kupp, Kenneth Walker, like A.J. Barner, I think if they have to go do that, they will. And if they do have to, I have a lot more confidence now in Sam Darnold that he can go out there and get the job done, because he passed that test against the Rams in an NFC Championship game with flying colors, man. He did a great job. And it was a great game, and I love watching it. And overall, and here's the funny thing, right? Because this is the one thing I'm kind of happy about not having Jace here today. Because he's such a Josh Allen hater, he will be the first person to come on the pod and talk about how now Sam Darnold has reached a Super Bowl before Josh Allen has. Or if we talk about Drake May part, now Drake May has, in his second year, is it his second year? Yeah, his second year as a pro, he has made a Super Bowl before Josh Allen has. It's insane. And again, it would turn into a Josh Allen hater fest, but it would be true. I wouldn't be able to have anything to argue against it, because now these are two quarterbacks that Josh Allen is looked at as being much, much better than when it comes to what they are as players. And these two quarterbacks are the ones getting the opportunity to go win a Super Bowl, and Josh Allen sitting at home getting a brand new head coach that, was his OC a few weeks ago. So definitely a great game. Again, a tale of two halves. It was two sides of a coin, one side of the coin being a great game, one side being a bad one. One question I did that people were asking because of the weather in that AFC Championship game, that every year is the big question is whether, are you more of a fan of having the Super Bowl in the elements, or would you rather it be in a dome where, the weather isn't going to be an issue? And the way that I watched that game, again, I'm going to say that maybe with some better teams, that game would have turned out differently between if it was in that same scenario. If it was the Rams and Seahawks playing in that snowy game rather than the Denver and the Patriots playing in it, maybe the game would have been better. But I think after watching that game, I think when you're going into a Super Bowl with two teams that are going out there to win one game to be the champions of the whole league, I do like the idea of not having to worry about the weather being an element to that. Again, if it is, I'm not sitting here hating if it is a snow game. Again, I'm not out there watching the Super Bowl, so I'm not going to sit here and be like complaining that like, it's a snow game. I'm sitting here on my couch in temperature controlled environment on my in my own home. But I don't hate weather in the Super Bowl, but I'm not going to sit here and complain if the NFL is like, hey, we're kind of going towards that way, and then as we go on Super Bowls, either we're going to be playing in nice weather and like in the South or in the West Coast in nice weather, or we're going to be playing in domes in the Super Bowl from now on. I don't think I necessarily disagree, because I'm just like, I don't want, if you're going to a game where both of these teams are playing their absolute hardest to go out and win, I do like the idea that you don't have to have the weather as a deterrent to be a potential issue as to why one of these teams or both these teams didn't play at their best. So I just think overall, I think I'd probably get behind the idea that like you don't want the weather to be a variable that can't be controlled to impact the game when you're having these two teams play this last game of the year. That's such a big momentous moment, being the Super Bowl, being the last two teams facing off for the season. I do like the idea of not having to worry about the weather having a huge impact on the game, even though I wouldn't be mad either way. I really wouldn't be. But if you made me choose, I think I'd choose domes and nice weather from now on for the Super Bowl. It is what it is. But it was one of those questions that I just thought, it's a good one. It's one of those philosophical ones of like, is the game meant to be playing the weather? Yeah, for sure. But once the weather gets to getting this bad, when there's a lot of snow and really cold weather and like supremely cold weather, I'm like, I get the idea that football wasn't meant to be played this late into the year. It really wasn't. And then as you add more games and you add more playoff weeks to the year and all of that, it's only pushed the game farther and farther back to where now they're dealing with some extreme weather they probably shouldn't have to be dealing with playing in the NFL. So I get the question being thrown out there, but it is what it is. But that's about it. I don't think I have anything else to talk about here. So that's about everything I wanted to do. Talked about the college football stuff, talked about the NFL stories, and now the NFC and AFC championship games. And that's all I got. I think it's only be one pod this week, unless something crazy happens to make me want to go ahead and pod again. So you probably won't have us. We probably won't be recording another one until next week going into the Super Bowl. Not this Sunday, but next Sunday. So that's about it. Hopefully we'll be able to get Jace on. The weather you probably won't be as bad. So hopefully we'll be able to get together and have a good pod before we do so we can preview the Super Bowl. And that's about it there. So that's all I got to say. So let's go ahead and end the podcast here. If you've been listening for a while, we appreciate you. If you're just now jumping on, and hopefully you like us and enjoy us enough to join us on this ride of talking about sports in the dumbest way possible. If this is the first pod you've listened to, make sure you go and listen to a different pod with both me and Jason, so you get a better idea of what we are at our best when you have both of us here, both of us podcast co-hosts, brothers, talking shit, making jokes, talk about sports the way that we do. Make sure you go listen to one of those so you can get a better idea of what we are at our best. But otherwise, if you do like us, we would appreciate if you could like our podcast, subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast 5 stars wherever you listen to us. We're pretty much available on all audio platforms out there, so it should not be hard to find us out there wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure you share us with friends, family, enemies, anybody you feel like could enjoy the pod we put out on a weekly basis, with it being 2 times a week during the football season, unless it's Super Bowl time, which makes it 1 again. We'd appreciate if you can do that. And then last but not least, if you could follow us on Twitter and or X, whatever you'd like to call it, at JB Sports Pod is the podcast handle. At Javante Boozer is my handle, and then at Jace Boozer 1 is Jace's handle, and that's about it. So make sure you guys have a great day, have a great night. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for always listening, and we will see you guys on the next one. Goodbye, y'all.